appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Dion's Daily Dose. Man, it's been a while since I messed that up. That's all good. Thanks for joining us. So today we are actually here with Commissioner Joe Haney, who is the sitting commissioner running for re-election this year. And we'll get a chance to touch base with him to see what all he's been able to accomplish and why we should re-elect him. So without further ado, Commissioner Joe Haney.
Hey, Dion. How are you?
Hey, welcome, Joe. Welcome to the show. So we had basically, we just used your kind of stock bio from your commissioner page, which does a really good job of explaining who you are and kind of your history. But personally, I'd like you to tell us kind of what you've been able to do since getting elected.
Sure. So as you know, pretty much the entire time I've been in office here, this past 3.5 years, for the most part, I've been in the minority position, which definitely has its challenges. That definitely makes it challenging. But overall, kind of the when you take the politics out of it, being commissioner is like kind of like being an operations manager. So that fits into my background quite well, being able to help try and manage departments, empowering the departments, because that's mostly what it is. You have to be able to empower your department heads to make the right decisions and to kind of think for themselves rather than constantly run to you for approval and being worried that they're going to get in trouble or something. If you've got good people in the positions, you don't have to worry about that, and you can have a much more hands-off approach, which has been good. Okay. Some of the things we were able to do, one of the things that I ran on was getting a EMS base in Rolling Prairie. And that was something that's been talked about for like at least 15 years before I was elected. And and my first year in office, February was my first year in office. So I think about 5 weeks in office, I started pushing on that. We wound up, there were some different issues with getting some different things drawn up and doing some stuff here and there. So there was a lot of kind of working behind the scenes with various department heads, from EMS to our county engineer. Our county engineer drew up some spec plans and some different stuff for free to give us, well, not for free, but he works for the county, but no additional charge. So we didn't have to hire out for that. That saved us some money. And get something that we could actually take and present to start moving forward with. And over the next couple of months, we were able to get the ball rolling, get that construction started, and it opened last year, which was good. So it took about a year between everything, because at the same time we were doing, as part of kind of part and parcel for that, we built on the other side of that piece of property, we had acquired a new county highway base up there, which was desperately needed. So we were able to get those two done relatively the same time. And then it opened up last year, which was actually a little bit of a fight to get a additional ambulance crew to actually man that. What initially a couple folks on the council wanted to do was send one of the ambulances from La Porte base out there with one of the crews, and then that would have left us with 3 ambulances in the city of La Porte. But explaining response times, explaining different call volumes and stuff and distances, we're actually able to get the additional funding to be able to fully man that. So we added an ambulance on, luckily. So now we're up to 8 ambulances in the county, which is good.
Okay,
Well, it's better than what we had, because before we were running at 7. And for a county our size, put it in perspective, next door in Porter County, they have about 2.5 times per person the amount of ambulances in the county than we do. So that's we're a bigger county than Porter County. We're a much larger county size wise. So so that's while we're talking about EMS. I'm trying to work. I had a meeting with the warden out at ISP and one of the project managers out there about a month and a half ago, I want to say. And they're actually designing the prison around a really nice pickup bay for EMS to come. It's actually really cool how it is. I'm not going to go into details. I don't know what details I can share, but it's really cool and much better than what's being done currently, either at ISP or at Westville. So I'm really excited about that. And I got a chance to sneak in there and redrop in the fact that it's a $1 billion project out there. And when they're combining the populations of both Westville and then ISP, and ISP, as you know, has a much older population than Westville does. There's constant EMS calls going on up there. So when this facility gets done, which is going to be about 4 years before it's actually the cell doors open, if you will, the call volume that we have now currently at Westville and ISP are going to be combined and right out of Westville. So I'm trying to get them to first carve out a hunk of land on maybe the corner or somewhere there, an acre or two, to allow us to put an EMS base. And I'm hoping that with all that funding that they have, $1 billion, what's throwing in $200,000, to help us get an EMS base built out there. We're going to have to staff it and man it. But right now, the Wanata base, for those folks who don't know, the base that's way down in Wanata actually goes up and covers Westville all the way up basically to PNW. The Michigan City, Michigan City, it's a huge distance. The Michigan City base has covered the toll road down and stop at the toll road. So a base in Westville would be huge to cover that middle gap, and it would also stop. We have a lot of coverage that we'll do. They call it 41, but it's coverage issues. So like if Wanata base goes out on a call, they'll take a ambulance from LaPorte and drive it down to the corner of 2 and 421, and they'll park in that gas station parking lot until just in case a call comes up down in South County, they're at least got a straight shot down 421 and it starts to carve off some response time, which is good. But if we can get a Westville base, that would either eliminate the need for them to do that coverage, or if they needed to, rather than park in a parking lot and just sit there idling their vehicle, they could park and go out to the Westville base if they needed to and cover there. So I'm hoping to have the same style base basically that we have in Rolling Prairie there in Westville. Enough room for 2 crews and an ambulance and a bay that will fit 2 ambulances. We only need to outfit it for 1 ambulance, and then some of that extra equipment that's in there to take care of a second ambulance, like the exhaust piping and stuff like that. We can rough those in, but we don't have to put in the rest of that equipment until we actually need to consistently store another, or add another ambulance on there. Which, the way growth is going, kind of coming across from Porte into Westville, the way things are coming from western St. Joe County into the eastern part of our county in Rolling Prairie. I'm glad we've got 2 bays up there. That was a little bit of an argument to put the second bay in there at the same time. And it's kind of like, the additional money to do that was very minimal compared to what would happen if we needed to build on another.
If you needed to expand it. That would be a significant expenditure. So
the last part of EMS, we're going to, what we need to rebuild our Wanata base. That thing was an old house that was turned into like a mechanics type shop, brake shop or something. That's now an EMS base. So we're going to have to work on replacing that. And we are in the process of replacing the Michigan City base. That base should have been replaced quite a long time ago. So we've got the land next to it. So already bought it. We already cleared that old house off that kind of had some issues on it. It's off. So that one, and then long term, that's the thing. We got to start thinking long term and strategically and have these things laid out so we can start having a plan to fill them in. The next plan, of course, would be and this would be at least 10 years down the road. So this isn't going to happen anytime that I'm around. 10 to 12 years down the road, probably would be putting, and maybe sooner if growth continues out there, because Kingsford Heights is going through the roof. But somewhere out in that area out there, we could really use another EMS base as well, just for response time, because that's the biggest thing. Even call time, you can't look at the number of calls per se as important as it is for response time, because that response time is key. If you're, if you're laying there having a heart attack, 20 minutes for an ambulance is a long time. That's an eternity, and that's, So sorry. Yeah, that's.
No, you're absolutely correct. And it's something that not a lot of people think about, unfortunately. But if you have need of an ambulance, you have need of an ambulance pretty quickly. There are some, like for example, strokes. There are some medications that need to be administered and can fix you, such as it is, but it has to be given within a certain time period. What is it, like an hour for what are those things called? You know more than I do when it comes to
Sure. So overall, there's something I talked about a lot called the golden hour. So this is something that goes back for a long time. So I was a former volunteer firefighter and EMT many moons ago, but the golden hour is a patient's survivability starts dropping precipitously once you hit that 1 hour mark. So that's a total 1 hour from the moment of the incident to actually getting to definitive care at the hospital.
Right.
And yeah,
when you have a 20-minute response time and then a 20-minute turnaround, that's most of your golden hour gone.
Yeah, you got 40 minutes out of your golden hour gone, and then you have to understand that response time is when they pull up in front of your house or the high school or whatever. Let's say it's a high school. You pull up out front. It takes you 2 minutes, minute, maybe 90 seconds tops to gather all to make sure you get all the gear out. You walk through the front doors. If it's at the back of the school, you have another minute or two walk. You have to assess your patient. That's a minute or two. Bring them back to the rig. That's a minute or two to wheel them out. And then once you're in the back of the ambulance, if you got to start some lines or something like that before you make the drive, you could be on scene for 20 minutes before you go in some of these cases. Right. Now, obviously, there's load and go situations and whatnot, but still, you could be, your entire hour is gone at that point. And that's just not something we should allow to happen here in this county.
Right. And it's not like we're looking at a massive expenditure in order to make it happen. Like you said, you're working with ISP/Westville, the DOC to allow a base there at the new prison. I think that's a phenomenal idea.
Yeah. The biggest expense when it comes to most of this is personnel. The cost of the EMT and paramedic. That's that's the biggest thing. But at the same time, there are a handful of things that government should provide. When I look at the proper role of government, there's a handful of things we should provide, and everything else is a nicety, right? So like when we get grants for trails and stuff, sometimes people will beat up on us a little bit for some of these trail grants. Yeah. Now I can't speak to the city of LaPorte, and I'm not going to for what they have, because they sometimes do things differently than the county. But I'm talking about from the county perspective, because we're doing it through our Parks Foundation. We wind up getting grants from the state, from the feds. We get grants from the Healthcare Foundation and some of these different entities. So usually these trails are going in at little to no cost. Now, obviously, you have to go through and run a repaver over it every 7 to 9 years or whatever it is, for asphalt or whatever. Some of these trails are just mulched out or whatever, cut down. So we're trying to do some more natural stuff with the parks. I've been on the parks. Well, I was on the parks board up until like 2 months ago when they yanked me off of it. But for a little over 3 years, I was on it, and we did a lot of good stuff there. And that old property where the old highway base is, once we get that cleaned up, we're going to turn that into like a nature type of park. I don't know if we're going to be doing anything with it other than cutting some trails initially and having a little parking area there. I don't expect any facilities there for several years, but we've got the land, we're saving it, we're securing it. And when time, funds, and other things allow, then we can do something with it. But at least now we're capturing it and saving it rather than getting rid of it and then trying to find somewhere to have something like that in the future, which can be the hard part, especially for parks, is finding a suitable piece of property. And that property is back in there is really cool for nature hiking, birding, stuff like that.
Nice. One of the other things you were able to accomplish, which there was a discussion with a particular elected official, I'm not going to out them, but they were actually unaware of the county health clinic. They didn't know about it. And so do you think, well, first of all, for those who aren't aware, county employees have access to a health clinic that was essentially started by you, right? You got the ball rolling, you put it together, staffed it, manned it, all the things that needed to be done with it. And it's at no cost to county employees to go there. And it actually saves the county
services
money.
Are no cost, but there's some other things they can get, but that aren't. But most of the general stuff is.
And it actually saves the county money compared to them going, elsewhere.
Yeah. So the short part of it is somewhere toward the middle to end, probably around third quarter of my first year in office, started looking at different things that some other, not just other municipalities do, but also some bigger companies like Fortune 500 companies. They'll offer their employees insurance. They'll also have some sort of health clinic option. So what that does, and in our situation, it becomes most of the Fortune 500 companies will offer discounted services there rather than free.
Right.
The way that we can offer free services is that it's done in conjunction with a 340B pharmacy program. I won't bore you with all the details, but basically it's for local folks who are lower income or nonprofit governmental agencies.
Okay.
So of course we fall into the governmental agency, and so that by having the clinic tied to this pharmacy, we get our drugs. For example, drug A may cost $1 versus at our 340B pharmacy, whereas if you go to Walgreens or CVS, you'd be paying $7 for that same prescription. Some of those differences are that drastic, $1 versus $7 type of thing. On the other end of it, some of them are closer. You save 50% on them, but by offering free services, it drives our employees to go to, it's completely voluntary. They can use the regular insurance like they want to. They can go to the regular doctors, the clinic. They do never have to set foot in if they don't want, or they can take it and leave it as they come. They can go one time and not go back again, or however they want. It's completely voluntary and basically a la carte, if you will. So they go, it's seen by a general practitioner, and there's some other services now as well that we've added on. We talk to about in a minute, but they write the prescriptions there, and then they have them filled right. They walk out the door into the door right next door, and they get their prescriptions filled there. Normally, the wait time is no more than like 10 minutes to get it filled, and then of course, like a normal pharmacy, if you have something refilled or whatever, you just come in and pick it up. The hours are good. And it saves us a ton of money because getting those discounted medications is huge. I mean, it's hard to, you have somebody, let's say, who's on, something like a remdesivir or something, where you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars. You can get that for, a couple $100 out of a 340 pharmacy. Massive difference. So even though they didn't pay, a $40 copay for that medicine, it didn't come off of their deductible, which they'd have to at least get it, several times a year. It's saving tremendous amount of money, which is good, especially right now as we need to keep our costs down. And right now it looks like some of the budgeting for it may have come out of when it was budgeted for, it may have come out of a different account. We're trying to get to the bottom of that. I don't know if you saw, there was an article recently on Hometown News of a couple different things. And I think the story confused a couple of different things, but the gist of it is kind of right. They're trying to get to the bottom of a couple of things, because there's been one of the things we sorted through since I've come on board was pharmacy rebates that don't have anything to do with the clinic. Okay. But we used Magellan as a pharmacy benefits manager, and every quarter we'd get about $250,000 to $300,000 rebate on medications. Which when you look at how many employees we have on insurance plus their families extended, all the different family members, we are a very large employer in LaPorte County. We're one of the largest, and so those checks were coming in and they were getting deposited into the wrong account. So part of how all this works is supposed to work is that our costs to our employees for insurance, for example, the rebates that come in from this Magellan pharmacy benefits management, PBM, as they come in, they're supposed to be going and reimbursing the kitty, if you will, that health insurance funds come out of. Well, for a couple of years, that wasn't going in there. So it dropped down a few $1 million from where it was. And then we wound up at that, I think the last council meeting that they had, having to move like $600,000 over to cover a shortage. Well, at the beginning of each year, you wind up having a ton of extra claims come in from the end of the year because everybody wants to get in under their deductible. Right. Yeah. So, in the last two years or 2 months of the year, people are, going and getting their surgeries done or any other procedures they need to get done because it's basically free at that point if they hit their deductible.
You met your deductible or your out of pocket or whatever. Let's face it, the last 2 months of the year, the crunch time for medical procedures.
Yeah. So usually, it's a pretty busy time of the month. So there's a committee or working group that's working on with our financial advisor, trying to figure out exactly how much money should have went in that didn't, and kind of get to the bottom of that right now. And it's just one of those things that's one of the things that happens when our treasurer's office hasn't fully balanced the cash to be able to have the proper audit, and we're sent in about 3 years. So right now we're just now in 2024 doing 2020's audit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it went about 3 years without the treasurer's office balancing the cash, and that's really
And
when that
I wanna-
stuff happens, it's just it's nuts. It leads to a cascading effect of different things happening, and this is kind of one of those side shoots that just happens. You would have caught sooner if they would have been drilling down on these accounts, but
right. And that's one of the things that I think was kind of confusing about the Hometown News article, and kind of people trying to understand, okay, so is there missing money? Is there not missing money? What is going on? And I think it's important for people to understand, because it took me a minute. I had to look at it. I'm like, okay, so the auditor is responsible for all accounts, but not necessarily, because the treasurer has access to these, and then they can actually lock the auditor out of being able to review stuff. It's actually pretty in depth, and I don't know if we should spend a bunch of time on it, but I do think it's important for people to understand kind of who's at fault and what's going on.
And I'm obviously not an auditor or treasurer, but I did kind of invest time into looking into what the different roles are, and there's segregation of duties. So the auditor's office is keeping balances of certain accounts, and they're supposed to reconcile that with the treasurer's office once a month. I don't want to, just because my wife's running for treasurer, I don't want to get too much on the treasurer's side, but long story short, the treasurer's office is the one who actually keeps the accounts, who actually has access to the bank accounts. So they have access to all those ledgers. And up until just here recently, like months, the auditor's office didn't have any way to view any of that. Now, they shouldn't be able to edit anything, but being able to look and make sure and track double check these things in real time versus once a month or whatever. That's where the issue is. So I had noticed last year there were some issues with that, and it's called Bank 6, and that's the ridiculousness of the way some of these accounts are named, like Bank 6. What does that even mean, right? Like, you just look at it like, okay, well, a lot of our health insurance funds are out of there. And last year, this was going back to August, I want to say last year, we started asking for bank statements. The auditor's office did for the bank statements for Bank 6, because they had noticed some issues coming up and they had concerns. And so after about a month and a half, they reached out to me. They're like, okay, by statute, you can immediately demand access to and see these records. It's state statute. The county executive has a right to look at the bank statements on a moment's notice. And well, I asked, and I was put off. So after 2.5 months, I made an issue about it at the commissioner meeting. Nothing happened. And then I put it out on social media. Said, hey, where's the money? Show me the bank statements. That's like, if you have it like, why hide these things? It doesn't make sense. So we finally got access to those, and we're pouring through those and trying to figure out, well, some of them anyway. And the auditor's office is mostly working on this, so it's probably a better question for them. But it's been concerning, to say the least, to figure out exactly where the money is and whatever. It's just bizarre. To quote the SBOA, the SBOA out of our last audit, which was completed for 2019, in it there's a paragraph in there that says the information that they received out of the treasurer's office, they were unable to actually get the actual cash balance, and because of that, they would have quote pulled out of the audit and not completed it, except for the fact that we are statutorily required to complete this audit. So
interesting.
That's why Juanita and myself, we've been calling for a third-party independent audit. I want to see somebody a large national firm that hasn't ever done any work with LaPorte County, and hopefully none of our vendors, to come in from the outside, get a good, fresh, clean look at this, dive through it, a forensic audit, go back, probably 10 years is probably what we're going to need to do to figure out exactly, because there's different issues along the way of different things, and we've got to figure out where things went wrong so we know exactly where it is, right? So like a year ago when they were trying to balance the cash for 2019, they found a $5 million CD in a bank in the middle of nowhere nobody had ever heard of and didn't know we even had. And at that point, the treasurer's office couldn't count for over $9 million. Then all of a sudden, a $5 million CD just shows up out of the blue that nobody knew about. Like how, right? Like in the private sector, that's what blows my mind. Like in the private sector, these things, they either don't happen, or if they do, people are fired.
Accountability.
Like, there's a consequence to it. And, and especially like, could you imagine trying to tell the IRS, as you're doing your books for your company or the SEC or whoever, we lost a few $1 million, oh well,
no biggie.
No biggie.
It's funny because we actually there was a story of another town, city, whatever, that found almost, I think, like $2.1 billion in a bank account that nobody knew about and no one had access to, and it's just boom, here you go, it's for the city. And allegedly there was an elected official who had been using the interest for the city. It's not like they were, pocketing it, but they weren't reporting it. So it turned into this big thing. You can look it up, but it's unfortunately a lot more widespread than people think it is. And it's something that needs to be addressed, especially if we want government to work for us rather than the reverse.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And really, I mean, I've tried to talk to our state legislators as well and say, hey, give the SBOA some teeth, the State Board of Accounts. Let's give some of these agencies some teeth to be able to actually hold folks accountable. I'm not saying you should, just start throwing people in jail because they're incompetent per se, but right. There's got to be a way for them to have some teeth, be able to come in and say, hey, look, you haven't completed an audit in 3 years. We're going on year 4. It's time for us to send some people in there and really start getting to the bottom of what's going on in your municipality. And that's
one of the things is the SBOA, like you said, there's no teeth to it. Yeah, they can make recommendations. They can say, hey, you screwed up, but they can't impose fines. They can't actually do anything. One of the things, not necessarily punitive, but one of the things I'd like them to be able to do is to, for example, insist or enforce an independent audit.
Yeah,
that would be nice.
The State Board of Accounts, one thing I don't think most people understand is that we actually, the county, have to pay for the State Board of Accounts to come in and do an audit on us. So bringing in an independent third-party auditor isn't going to be a total. It's not like the total part of that cost is going to have to be borne. It's, we'll take the cost of the independent audit and subtract it from what the SBOA would have charged us. And of course, independent is probably going to be more. But at this point, I think we owe it to everybody to figure out exactly what's going on. And hey, who knows? Maybe we find another $5 million CD floating out there, right?
Right.
And that is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. So basically it's either there's, so we found the 1.5, right? It was 9. Mm-hmm. So we're down to 4 that's MIA or at least unknown.
Yeah, they did whittle it down further. I'm trying to remember exactly what the final numbers were. It was in 6 digits. It wasn't 7 digits at least.
Okay.
Of cash that they really couldn't figure out. And, right. It is what it is, right? So, some of this stuff is some of the processes that have been used. And I've heard this, regardless of whether it's for financial or open door laws or anything else, we've always done it that way. And I cannot count the number of times I've heard that. And literally, it's almost a weekly basis. So when I came in, I thought I was doing really good because I caught a number of different things we shouldn't have been doing that we were, and nothing necessarily criminal. So, and there's different things. When I talk about corruption and whatnot, it's just processes, right? Like people you have some of the same folks that have been doing it the same way just because the person before them did it. They don't realize state law changed and you have to kind of do this differently or that differently. But
in many instances,
and I caught a bunch of stuff.
Just
but then
go ahead.
So then Justin Keel comes in on the council.
Mhm.
And I think he found more stuff in his first year in office than I did the prior 2 years that I was in. He is just he's a savant when it comes to picking out and being able to dive into the IC code and find stuff. And it's been fantastic because a
Yeah.
lot of these, a lot of people are like, why do we have to do it like that? Or, do we really? And so all these rules that are and things that have been put in state statute and the changes that have been made over the years are most of the time are done precisely to stop the things that are occurring right now. And if we followed, yeah, it may be a little bit more of a pain, it may be more work, but if we followed those all the way along the line, we wouldn't wind up in the position that we're in. And
Right.
that's, a little bit of work up front is a lot better than a lot of work down the road, because eventually somebody's got to pick up the pieces. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's something that I wanted to ask you, and it's kind of making the rounds right now, and people are up in arms, right? Aside from the whole accounts thing, one of the big conversation pieces right now is solar farms. There have been several meetings about it, several people both for and against the ability. And what it comes down to is, can farmers or landowners allow solar farms to be built on their land and then collect the rent for it? There are those who are against it, who say it affects property rights, it affects this, it affects that. And then there are those more in it's their land, they can do what they want with their land, they're not breaking any laws. Well, one of, I think, the most visible things right now is there's a lot of discussion about whether or not commissioners can step in and do something. And there have been people who have made various promises regarding that, if elected or if reelected, or if this or if that, they can stop this from being a thing. How much control do the commissioners have over solar farms? Are they the authoritative body on this?
It's a complex question. So whenever something like this comes up, the first thing I like to say is, as a government body, we have to follow the rules, right? So just because we don't like something or there was an issue around some sand stuff. We may have heard about it for the past several years.
Yes.
And when I came in, I said, my position on it was, we're going to follow the rules and the letter of the law to a T. We're going to march this thing down. We're going to take one last full approach on it. And if we win, if we win, then we win. And if we don't, we can say, hey, this is the third time we've done it. This time we made sure we did every single thing by the book. We followed all the rules. Everything was done appropriately. And that's where we are. And right now, things are still going through that process. The legal issues, and I won't talk too much about them because they're ongoing. Everything's holding, for the past nearly 2 years now, roughly. No, quote unquote mining has been occurring. No, there's no trucking going on, anything like that. So, that's more than has been accomplished in the 7 years prior. So that's huge. And that's what comes from not trying to take a shortcut. In the short term, some folks can sometimes get upset about that. But if we're not strategically going about things, you lose in the long run a lot of times. So when it comes to the solar farm stuff, the Plan Commission makes recommendations and proposes changes to either the zoning ordinances or the JZO itself, the Joint Zoning Ordinance. So the solar ordinance is a standalone ordinance. It was passed when I first took office in January 21. I was on the Plan Commission. And one of the things I looked into at the time, and I know folks are saying, oh, this has just come out of nowhere. Well, when I took office, I knew that between solar and wind farms and stuff like that, there were different issues that were coming here to the county. And I wanted to put in a solar ordinance in place because you saw a couple counties around the state who got caught with their pants down. They didn't have an ordinance. These companies came in and they just started building because So first of all, we got to remember this is America.
Right.
So everything is legal by default unless it's illegal. Unless there's something specifically saying it's illegal, it's legal.
Right.
So in these counties where they didn't have any kind of ordinance, solar, they just come in, put stuff started going up. Right. And I didn't want that. So we put in at the time, which was a really good, we spent a lot of time on it. And one of the things I thought to put in there was a decommissioning bond, to make sure that if this company goes bankrupt, they disappear, whatever, the money is there to actually tear this stuff down and return the land to the way it was before.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah. So in the past 3 years, there's been a lot of changes. So like now, some of the newer solar panels, they're more durable. They weren't, yeah, there was a huge hailstorm somewhere that broke panels. I don't know the age of them, but the panels now are more durable. And this isn't like a stint for solar. This is just trying to talk about some of the things that I hear. So the panels much more durable. They're primarily made now, like in the past, there was a lot of cadmium in them, heavy metals. Now they're primarily just all sand, silica, and aluminum. Now, obviously, there's the wiring that comes off of them, and the wiring, the little conductor boxes are different than that. And, there's concerns, obviously for those as well. But some of the problems that you saw from like 20 years ago where, these panels would break and they would start leaching all this stuff, the new panels just can't do that now because they don't have them in there like that. So they're more advanced. They're meant to last longer. They're meant to last like 35, 40 years now as opposed to the old ones. Theoretically, they're supposed to be doing 80% at like 30, 35 years. Which is still viable enough, allegedly. Yeah. I don't know on that. That's their thing, how often they want to replace panels. But things like wetland setback, stuff like that, just to make sure we're trying to do right in screening. Screening is a big thing. So right now on the Plan Commission, and I know some folks say I don't work well or get along with others, but it's only when people are trying to do shady stuff that I get my my feathers ruffled, if you will. But for example,
I want to stop you right there just real quick, because I really do want people to understand that it's not like, because there's obviously there's comments, there's this, there's that, where, I just want it quiet. I just want people to get along. I just want this, whatever, right? We just want a boring government. And we would have a boring government if it wasn't for people, like you said, trying to do shady stuff or attempting to kind of get around the outside of certain rules or regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I said I would come in and I would fight for the people and myself, I meant it. And that's sometimes what it looks like. Now, at the same time, I was appointed. I was appointed to the RDC, and on the RDC, I was elected president on the RDC. And then, of course, Commissioner Grammarosa crashed her car and got mad that I turned her in for forgery and counterfeiting, and they pulled me off a lot of committees. But I wouldn't have been elected president of the RDC if I wasn't able to get along with folks and people didn't think that I was that I was qualified leader. I'm currently on the Plan Commission still, and at the beginning of the year, I was elected unanimously to be the president of the Plan Commission, which is a 9-member body. So you've got 9 members from all different parties, appointed by different bodies, be it appointed by the commission, appointed by the council, appointee from Purdue. So I think that shows that, people trust my leadership and my judgment. And anyway, that's just an aside. So as part of the, I don't know how I segued off into that, but yes. So as president of the Plan Commission, I formed a solar committee. And we've met once. We're meeting again the end of this week. We're going to meet at least one more time before the public workshop on April 23rd. I'd have to double check. It's that 4th Tuesday. So at 5 o'clock before our regularly scheduled 6 o'clock meeting, we're going to have a workshop. And then during the meeting, I am anticipating and hoping, and I'm have a tightened up version of our ordinance in place, and we'll see what else other members may or may not want to add to it. If they think it's either good, too strict, not strict enough, or whatever, to try and put a few more guardrails around this. Because with these projects now going to 35 years, we didn't really anticipate that. We didn't see that, just 3 years ago. That's how quickly some of this technology has moved forward. So we're going to try and adapt to that. I'm also working on a battery storage ordinance as best as we can get. Now we're going to not call it a battery storage ordinance, but we're going to call it an energy storage system, which encompasses everything, because as technology changes, they're changing names, and you don't want a company coming and doing stuff. But at the same time, the state legislators have taken away some of our ability to do stuff. So when it comes to the battery storage, 99.9% of that now has been taken away from municipalities and is actually under the direct control and oversight of the Indiana Department of Homeland Security. So there's virtually nothing we can do about that, about battery storage. There's a little bit we can do from the BZA perspective of site selection, a little bit, but that's, there's there's very little we can do with that, unfortunately.
Okay.
And it is what it is. We can't specify. They have to have certain fire extinguishing procedures or anything. Now, we have been working with the companies there because there's a couple of smaller battery storage things around, and getting them to train our volunteer fire departments and city as well to for because it's when you're fighting battery, these battery type fires, it's completely it's not like fighting a regular fire. It's very different, and there's a lot of different challenges, as well as in some instances, depending on what's in there, containing any water runoff, because you don't want to have contaminated water runoff. So you don't necessarily always want to dump a ton of water on it.
Right. There's different methods of fighting that basically tech has evolved. We need to evolve with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our firefighting as well. So I guess a good summation of at least the solar farm thing is that, like you said, it's complicated.
Yeah.
But the Planning Commission is predominantly the governing body when it comes to deciding stuff like that.
For ordinances, yes. And then the BZA is kind of the way it's set up. It's quasi-judicial board, and it actually decides on any variances or things like that. So from the solar ordinance, industrial solar requires a special exemption. So it is permitted on ag land. But so they'll have to go before the BZA. They can try and impose different additional restrictions on it if they want, things like that. So in some instances where our ordinance may be a bit vague, at some points it's slightly vague on purpose, because it gives the BZA that flexibility to be able to go above and beyond. So you want some flexibility there. At the same time, you want to have the guardrails there. So it's interesting how the different bodies work together to try and accomplish the same thing. But hopefully that kind of puts it into perspective. And kind of my overarching view on this is we have to be consistent with what we do. So when we say people have property rights, they do. I am a firm believer in property rights, and an individual's right extends all the way right up to the equal rights of someone else, and that's the only boundary, right? So when people talk about junk cars, for example, somebody's got a car on their property that's a little older or whatever, I really don't care. But now, if you have that, especially if you can't see it from the road, like, who cares? But if you've got that old car that's out there, it's leaking oil, it's leaking fuel into the ground, coolant, and running off on your neighbor's property or seeping into the ground and contaminating well water, that's a completely different issue. You don't want to poison the environment. So you have your rights, but you're not allowed to poison the air or water, or ground of your neighbors and stuff like that. So we have to try and strike that balance. When you look at solar farms, industrial solar, whatever you want to call it, so on ag land right now, for example, CAFOs, or confined feeding operations, are legal, and they do not require any kind of variance. You can just go out, and if you got the ag land, as long as you follow what's in our JZO, you can throw one up. So where all these solar panels are going to be, they could put, there's a large chicken company, for example, right now that's been in the news, and they are firing American workers left and right and bringing in basically migrants, illegals. Well, let's just put it that
illegal
way.
Immigrants, I'll say it.
Illegal people who illegally crossed and now that are trying to get some working permits or whatever. It's like, no, you need to go back to where you came from. That's a different story. And then apply legally like everybody else did. That way you're not jumping, because there are hundreds of thousands of immigrants who want to come to this country that are going through the system, and all these other folks are jumping in front of them. It's not right. But I don't want to get sidetracked on that. The point is that, this large chicken company could come in here and open up a massive confined feeding operation right where these are. There's nothing we could do to stop it. Right. If you're talking about, where these solar panels are, they could come and put, let's say, a big cattle or dairy area, and then you got a big container, holding tank of cow poo sitting out back. Would you rather have solar panels next to you or cow poo? And I'm not trying to denigrate anybody who does any of these various different types of farming. I love chicken, right? I love steak. I love cheese and dairy products, right? So we need these things, and they have to go somewhere, and that's okay. My point is that it's important to realize the ramifications of stopping someone from doing something and what might the alternative be. So I'll give a good example of that. Last year was the 1 year I was not on the plan commission, and they shot down a 350 subdivision, home subdivision, 350 home subdivision out on State Road 2 next to an existing subdivision. The area there was wooded. So it wasn't like they were even taking farmland. They were going to chop down the trees. They were going to save some trees and a lot of nice green. They were actually built in because of some of the feedback, a lot of green area in this subdivision. And it was right there next to the existing water and sewer extension that went out to Rolling Prairie. The perfect place for a subdivision. Well, what wound up happening, it looks like you're buffering there. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I'm good. I can hear you.
All right. So what wound up happening was some folks came, some pretty vocal folks came. They advocated against it. The plan commission wound up shooting it down. And some of the neighbors also got a little concerned about the subdivision going in there. How would it affect the schools? And first of all, you don't build 350 homes overnight, right? And the school populations in a lot of these areas are starting to drop. So you need the population to increase. Otherwise, you'll wind up having schools close like they tried to do in Kingsford Heights. And then you wind up having to bus your children from, your town or your area to, another part of the county to have to go to school. Right. So it got shot down. The company they thought it was going to go through. They had bought this land. So the company sold it. They sold the land. They're not going to be able to build on it. And when something gets shot down by the plan commission, you can't go back before them for another year. Okay. So they sold it. A neighboring farmer bought the land. Interestingly enough, a neighboring farmer who had advocated against it because this subdivision would have then been too close to industrial farming. The property was bought. They clear cut every tree on there. All the brush and scrub brush and small limbs and stuff that they couldn't sell off are being burned in big piles right next to the existing subdivision. And I assume it's going to be farmed just like the land next to it. So be careful what you wish for, right? Like, right. I would be willing to bet, and I've spoken to at least one. I'm willing to at least say I spoke to at least one, because some of these folks in that area are a little, don't want retribution, but that said, I wish they'd went ahead with the subdivision, because, now I've got all this smoke and stuff blowing right across my house. All this stuff was chopped down. It's, we lost the woods anyway. At least before, we would have had a little bit of woods there buffer between the two subdivisions, and it is what it is, right? So people have a right, especially some of these farmers have owned this land for generations. Yeah. How do I tell somebody who's owned land for generations, especially if all they have on it is GMO corn and soybeans, right? Like it's not like 99% of this land, I don't think, is anything other than GMO corn and soybeans. So how do I tell them that, you've owned this land, it's been in your family for generations, but I don't want you to do that. So no, you can't do it. What's going to happen in some instances, these folks are going to have to sell their family farms. But as some of these folks are getting older, they need to cover their medical bills. They have different expenses. They can lease this land, get 3 to 4 times the amount for leasing it to solar than they can to leasing it to a neighboring farmer to farm. Because cash rent for like GMO corn and soybeans, like $250 an acre. Yeah. And they'll get 3 to 4 times that lease in its solar, and it's pegged. And allegedly, the contracts, from what I've heard, I haven't seen them, but the folks who have signed them, a couple of them, have told me that there's an automatic inflation increase every year. So they're going to be going up every year. That's what I heard. I haven't seen the contracts, but. And again, even if it wasn't going up and they weren't going to make additional money and they were going to be locked into it, it's their choice, right? It's not, if you can't, it's not my choice to say how much money you should or shouldn't be making. Whatever you can get, you can get. But anyway, they're going to be able to save the land, because none of the land's being sold; it's being leased. So their family's going to be able to hold on to this. And then in 30 or 40 years, if their kids or their grandkids want to take the land back and farm it, when the solar company's gone, that bond is going to make sure all that stuff's yanked out of there and go right back to farming. And then you rested the land for 20, 30 years. And a lot of studies are out there that when you let the land rest for, even if it's just 5 years, it can bring back so much nutrients and benefit to the soil. But if you rest that land for 20 or 30 years, graze some sheep underneath it. It's just a lot of sheep. There's huge contracts with a lot of these places that let sheep graze under these panels. Let them do their thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but at the same time, I don't have a right to some of the same folks who want me to respect their rights have to understand they have to respect other people's rights. And and quite honestly, at this point, the number of phone calls and emails I've gotten have been more pro property rights, not necessarily pro solar, but I've gotten some messages that are like, look, I'm not necessarily a fan of solar, but I appreciate what you've said at these meetings that you have to respect property rights. Because if I don't respect your rights, how am I going to expect you to respect my rights?
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. So we are going to tighten up our solar ordinance. We are going to crack down some different areas and tighten it up and strengthen it. But as far as, as the Plan Commission attorney said at our last Plan Commission meeting, a straight up moratorium was probably going to be viewed as an unconstitutional taking. And the last thing this county needs right now is another lawsuit.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there. We've got Porte County has their fill of lawsuits right now. There's still several that are in there. Got a couple of comments. Dusty says Gene Smith called it out in the commission workshop. I was against the solar farm, but after listening to him, I'm good now. After listening to him talk, make sure we have fire control, traffic control, dust, and trash control.
Mm-hmm. And part of the most of that is that once everything's in and running in a few years and it's stabilized, there's going to be very little traffic, very little disruption or anything else. But when you look at some of the stuff that's happened down over in just east there, I don't know if that's technically New Carlisle or New Carlisle or not, but you get out into that area out there going towards St. Joe or in St. Joe, but as you're heading down across two, the dust and debris and stuff on the road hasn't been watched and policed as it should. It's a bit of a mess out there, and I know they've gone back and forth with that, but that's one of the things, like with our MS4 that we've been directing them to, is to keep up on these things. So there are dust control, erosion control measures, and things like that we have that we can enforce and that we will be enforcing in the county, and to make sure that they know that. And whether it's construction, no matter what kind of construction site it is, whether it's solar or whatever, we're not going to let you tear up our roads or trash them or smoke out, dust out your neighbors, I guess would be a better way to put it.
Right. Dusty did bring up, you got to advertise for talking to me that it needs to be advertised so people see it. You could, by all means, follow the page, turn on notifications, it'll pop up. But I understand, I will endeavor to do a better job at getting the word out when we're going to have these. But he did mention that he went down by the one in Jasper County, and it's a disaster area down there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard. I haven't been down there in a bit, but yeah, I have heard some issues about that down there, and it's one of those things. Like, there are mechanisms government has to control those things, and you just have to utilize those mechanisms. You let the developers, contractors know, you got to do the right thing or you're going to get in trouble for it. You're going to get fined for it. And, you don't lay down the hammer the first time. You give them a chance to do better and improve, because accidents can happen, right? Like, we get a big, wind and rainstorm, and some of the erosion control measures can get, shifted out of place and whatnot. But, if you get a repeat offender, let them know, we're not going to tolerate it. And there's fines and other mechanisms we can use to stop things. And, and luckily, we've had a pretty good record of that here in the county, and at least in this past year and a half anyway. But yeah, you got to stay on top of it.
Right.
Otherwise, you want a Wild West situation.
Yeah, exactly. You end up with, there's no regulation. The places can do whatever they want, and then it creates issues for the neighbors and the population and whatnot. Jack says fugitive dust is an IDEM violation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
So is that I'm going to guess Indiana Department of Environmental Management.
Mm-hmm.
Did I call it?
Yeah, environmental
Learning
management.
my acronyms.
Yep. And we can enforce that through as well through our local MS4. We have our own things that we can do with that, as well as getting IDEM involved as well. So it's air quality standard, and we had an issue pop up with that where there's a company that's doing actual sand mining, and I don't mean they're actually digging and harvesting and actually processing sand at an area in the county. They're set up as an industrial business. They've been doing it for a while. Well, some of their mitigation stuff slipped, as I think part of their ownership changed, and some stuff dropped down the lines of trucks doing different things and whatnot. So we got a hold of them and we talked to them, and we had a meeting, and I sat in on one of those meetings. And when you have a commissioner sitting on a meeting with a company, it helps to enforce that we're serious and let them know that, eyes are watching on this, kind of from the top down, so to speak. And they really stepped up and they installed new tracking. I forget, I don't remember the technical term, but there's a technical term for like the ridge tracking that they drive over to knock all the dirt off the tires before they get there. So you have like gravel, and then you have like a bump type system that rattles all the stuff off the tires, and then some gravel after that, and then you wet it down to make sure the dust doesn't come out, wet down the working area as well, to stop that from escaping. And they've done a pretty good job. I mean, they've turned nearly 180 degrees from where they were for a little while. And it's one of those things, though, as summer kicks back up and it starts getting drier again, it's probably one of those things we're going to have another talk with them. I'm just guessing, because that's what happens every once in a while. You just got to remind them, it's a once a year thing. A lot of these companies that kind of do their thing, but you gotta remind them every once in a while and get them back on track, at least for a few months or a year.
Yeah. You got to stay on top of them and make sure that the companies do what they're supposed to do. So just kind of to wrap up, we've learned about what you've done, and it's a lot based on the fact that you were in the minority pretty much the entirety of your tenure with Grammarosa, that getting elected. That was supposed to be a Republican majority on the commissioners, but it didn't work out that way because she's crazy, and I'm just going to say that. I don't care. She's insane. So you don't have to say anything. I can say whatever I want. But realistically, what would you like to see for your next term? Like, assuming you get reelected, what would you like to accomplish?
So there were some things that I thought when Commissioner Grammarosa got elected that there was that I thought we were going to do. So one of those things was strengthening our whistleblower ordinance. So one of the things that I was concerned about was retaliation on employees. I did get a whistleblower protection ordinance passed. Again, thanks to social media shaming Mateus and Brzezinski into doing it. But it was much more watered down than I would have liked. So I want to see us strengthen that. Also, we need a purchasing ordinance in this county, so that all the department heads are operating, everybody is operating under the exact same thing. And surprisingly enough, all we need to do is copy Lake counties. Lake County, Indiana pioneered the #1 top rated. I know, Lake County of all places, right?
Right. I'm like, wait a minute, Lake?
They got in a lot of trouble a while back, and this was kind of the way to get back in the good graces of the state government. And they developed a fantastic public purchasing manual. So no matter what it is, it covers virtually everything. We could adopt it sight unseen, and it would be infinitely better than the nothing we have now. There may be a couple tweaks to make for it here and there, to suit us a little better, but generally speaking, it's perfectly set for a county government. So I want to see that. And that way everybody's operating on the same rules. Everybody knows everything. Everybody's fully on board with when you need to get quotes, when you need to get bids, sealed bids. Everything's done just right. And there's no question, like, okay, what do I need to do? Flip through it. There we go. It says right there in black and white. That way you don't have department heads trying to look through state statutes and figure out what goes where. Are they looking at latest one for 2024. They wind up looking at one for 1998, right? So if you're not paying attention and you start searching and clicking, you may not be on the newest one. And sometimes that can innocently happen, right? It just is what it is. The other thing, and the big thing that I thought we were going to do this year, but isn't going to happen this year, is to do an ethics ordinance. So I want to pass an ethics ordinance for LaPorte County with teeth that is passed jointly or bicameral, joint ordinance between the council and commission that will require a super majority to change or repeal. So that way, in 2013, for example, Shaw Friedman came back as county attorney in 2013. You look back at the commissioners who were there at the time, the first thing they did in January was repeal LaPorte County's ethics ordinance. So we don't have an ethics ordinance. Now, we are part of SEAC, the Shared Ethics Advisory Commission out of Lake County, but we still need an ethics ordinance in this county. So I want to see an ethics ordinance passed, try and give it as much teeth as we can, and then make sure it's passed by a majority of both commission and council, and require a supermajority to change it or repeal it. That way it can't be done on a whim by 2 out of 3 commissioners or anything. It'll take 2 different meetings, so a meeting of both the commissioners and the council to pass it. So hopefully it gets out enough word to the people that, hey, they're trying to screw with the ethics ordinance. Look at what they're doing. Let's put some eyes on it. Because what one of the things I love about the founding fathers of this country, they looked at what they had when they crafted the Constitution, and then they realized that, all right, as they were crafting it, we need to put something, we're not going to be here forever. We need to put things in place to put chains on the government to from now until the end of time. And that's what I would like to do. I want to see as many chains put down on the Porte County government that we can to rein us in and put up guardrails, not just while I'm in office, but that hopefully can stand the test of time. If we make it so hard and arduous for them to repeal these things, then they're gonna have to keep going at it, because it'll look so bad if they try and repeal it next time rather than just do it, at the first meeting of the year and just poof, done. This way, at least there's always people up for election. At least every 2 years, there's, half of everybody's up for election, and that hopefully will hold that together. I hope.
And so, real quick, I think it's important for people to understand that you're talking about limiting government, not limiting the population, not limiting the citizens.
Right. Yeah. No, this is limiting government only, not the people. So, so elected officials, department heads, get everybody constrained, everyone who's elected or working for county government constrained. That way, they're doing the right thing on behalf of the people. Right.
Yeah. Hey, I really appreciate, you taking the time to talk to us tonight. Pretty much the end of it. I do have one question though from someone, and it's going to be a really, really hard one for you to answer.
Okay.
So for those that don't know, your wife loves cats. She has essentially a cat rescue, and you guys have a large property with enough room for lots of animals. You love your animals, but I've had multiple people ask, which one of them is your favorite cat?
Oh, gosh, that is the hardest question of the night. Which one's my favorite cat?
It's like saying which one's your favorite child, right?
All right. How about this? Which cat do I think loves me the most? How about
there
that?
You go. Okay, we can take that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bear. I think it's Bear. So initially we had thought Bear was a boy, tiny, but Bear is a girl, and she is a tiny black cat. I mean, she weighs maybe 8 pounds. She has access to the same amount of food everybody else does. There's always dry kibble for our cats 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But she's a zoomer. She's athletic. She's going somewhere. She's going in a hurry. She runs, jumps, climbs. I mean, she's just like always zooming. But
I have one like that. Never walks. Always bounces or runs.
Yep. But at night when I go to bed, I'll get into bed and she jumps into bed with me, and she either lays on my chest, or if I'm laying on my side, she'll curl up like right under my arm, like right up in the crook of my arm, or whatever, and pretty much spends the entire night with me. And when I wake up in the morning, she's there, like right next to me, like nose to nose. So I think that cat loves me the most, and there's certainly a special bond between the two of us. I was always a dog person growing up. I never had a cat until I got married, and
Oh,
my
okay.
wife, we rescued a cat,
Mhm.
and that was my first real time ever spending any time with a cat. Because if you go to like if you were to come over here and visit our house, if our cats don't know you,
Right.
you may think we have one cat because we got one cat. It's like a social butterfly.
Mhm.
He's just he's just like, hey, what's going on? You wouldn't see another cat in the house. Like
Yeah.
they'll be hiding, or we've got a large house, so they go wherever. They're not going to be around.
Right.
But yeah, it just cats are so cool. Like I've got a German Shepherd, and he's really good with cats. And I love him, and I've always been a dog person. I've owned several German Shepherds over my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cats are cool, and they all have very different personalities.
Yes.
But we've rescued all of our cats, so they've all come from either literally catching them out of the middle of the street or off the interstate, or from a shelter. And even the ones that are a little more aloof, they are so grateful. They're just so grateful. So yeah,
Nice.
if you don't have time, if somebody doesn't have time for a dog, they've never considered a cat, especially if you're, you don't have small kids or anything to play with the cat, go
Yeah.
to the shelter and adopt one of the older cats. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
super old. At after 2 or 3 years old, a lot of the kittens out of them, they
Mhm.
still like to play, but it's not like,
Oh, yeah.
when they're younger. And my little bear, she's kind of an anomaly that she's still a Zoomer, and she's like 5 years old now. But um, like I said, they're all unique.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like at like 3, 4, 5 years old, they start chilling out. They're tame, and man, you rescue one out of the shelter, and they're so grateful. They're so grateful. And they're just loving animals, and it's nice to especially if you don't have any kids, or you don't have you work a long day, you come home,
Mhm.
just to have somebody living that's there, that kind of helps give you a little extra purpose in life, just instead of coming home to an empty house, if you will.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. There's there's Freed's Cat Shelter in Michigan City, and then there's
Mhm.
Independent Cat Society in Westville, and then doesn't there's one more, right? The
Michiana Humane
Michigan
Society.
Humane
They do
Society.
they don't just do cats. They do dogs. They do uh, guinea pigs, like all kinds of animals up there at that
Mhm.
one. And then our LaPorte County Animal Shelter as well always has a
Yeah.
high
That's
volume of cats there as well. And you can't go wrong with any of those any of those groups. From time to time, we have free adoptions. When we're just become so inundated, we're out of space at the animal shelter, we'll do a free adoption day or a couple days for the cats sometimes.
right.
Kitten season is coming up too, so it'd be good to get some of those animals out. And if you live somewhere and there's feral cats around your area, the good news is they eat a lot of mice. So if you see a feral cat, think to yourself, that feral cat's taking out a lot of mice. Especially
Absolutely.
live in city limits, and it's nothing against any city. It's just a problem any city has, right? Like
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
it just is what it is.
Mhm.
Um, but you see a cat, especially if it has a little ear clipped, one of its ear clips, it means it's been TNR'd, which is trapped, neutered, and returned. So
Mhm.
they'll catch the cat, they'll take it, have it spayed or neutered, give it a rabies shot, and then return it to where they found it.
Right.
And having a population of sterile cats in your area will actually keep other cats out, and will keep the
Mhm.
population from increasing. And there's a lot of studies that show that if you try and remove feral cats from one area, you're just going to wind up increasing the problem, because more cats are going to pile in. Same thing
Right.
with coyotes, like out here on the farm. If I was to go out one night and take out all the coyotes out here, I'd have a much bigger coyote problem in a couple of months. Whereas
Right.
if you occasionally harvest one or two here or there when they get a little too threatening to your animals, and my neighbor, well, I use the term neighbor relatively, across the street, who has chickens, you take one or two here or there, they learn their boundaries, and they don't come out, and the
Mhm.
pack knows kind of its place. So same thing with that. It's just
Right.
there's so many cool ways we can, as I've learned more of, not just helping my wife with some of the cat rescue that she does, but just being in government and seeing how different communities react to different things,
Mhm.
how you can be a good steward to everyone, which is good. Doing things that make sense, or responsible.
Mhm.
That's the way to go. And hey, nobody likes rats. You may not care for the cat pooping into your garden, but it's a lot better than having an infestation of mice charging into your basement or garage or barn or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would rather have a My buddy, he's got a couple of feral cats in his neighborhood, and they're very loud. They get into his garage, and he's constantly complaining about it. And I was like, it's better than mice or rats, though, right? And he was like, I don't know, man. I'm like, yeah, it is. You can whine all you want, but it is.
Yeah, it sounds like they need to do some trapping out there, because when especially the male cats, when you get and females, obviously when they go into heat they can be loud, so you can eliminate that by spaying them. And then the male cats, when you neuter them, it takes away a lot of that testosterone, and they don't become as territorial, and they aren't they don't fight for territory, right? They only fight if they're attacked. And that's really good, because then you have a good mix. If he's having a lot of noise, that's because I would assume it's because they're not neutered or spayed. And you can always reach out to some of these different groups, ICS, Freeds, and they can, if you've got a feral cat problem in your area, and they do some volunteering and come out there, and some different organizations that donate money to try and get that done as well. So, and they're all volunteers who work out of there. Put in their time, and I've done that with my wife. I've sat out in the middle of the night, because that's one of the best time to trap, and just kind of watch her while she watches the traps.
Yeah, I worked at Freed's as a volunteer when I was a teenager, and the Michigan City Humane Society. At the same time, it was a lot. It was a lot, but it was a very rewarding experience. There's just something about animals and taking care of animals and making sure that they're safe and all of that. That's just a phenomenal experience. So we're out of time, Joe. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. I personally will have my fingers crossed, but we'll have you on again before the general election. How's that sound?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to come back. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a great evening.
You too. Have a good night.
All right. Joe Haney, Commissioner Joe Haney, District 3. He is up for re-election this year. And I'm going to tell you guys, look, all the BS with Connie aside, all the BS with Mrzinski aside, Joe is the only one that is consistently reachable and consistently answers the public, both on social media, coming onto this show, coming onto the radio. I mean, you guys, you're going to vote for who you're going to vote for. But me personally, every single time that I've reached out to Joe to ask questions about, hey, man, I saw this during the commissioner meeting, what's going on, whether it's on social media, whether it's via text, he always answers. He's a busy guy. Sometimes it takes him a while, but he always answers. I can't say the same for other elected officials. Very few of them do that. You may not agree with him on everything. There's some stuff that, may not necessarily line up, but consistently, he will have a conversation. He will listen to what we have to say. And what more can you ask for? I mean, especially when we've got certain people that should not be elected again. Just put it that way. They shouldn't have been elected the first time, but they were, because they made promises and we said, okay, all right, yeah, we'll give it a shot. And they're freaking nuts. Period. End of story. That there's no other way to say it. And there's tons of nicknames, and people can say whatever they want. And I can say whatever I want. And they just have to be like Rumpelstiltskin and go, and there's nothing they can do about it. You got to love it. I love America, dude. We don't have it for much longer, I think, unless some things change. But for right now, we still got free speech, and I intend to use it. So thanks for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up, actually, on what day is it Thursday or Friday? Let me double check. Sorry. We've got Juanita Haney for treasurer. She's going to be on the show, but I got to find out exactly when, because I wrote it down and then I forgot to look at it before I went. It is Friday. I see, I was right. It's the 12th. Friday the 12th. She'll be here at 7 p.m. And we actually have tomorrow. Well, I have Spencer England was supposed to come on the show. Just so you know, he's running for state senate for District, I think it's District 8. It's Mike Bohacek's district. He was supposed to come on the show, and all of my guests, I asked for a headshot so that I can do the graphic, and a bio so that I can include it, so you guys know who they are and what they're running for, etc. And he hasn't gotten back to me, so we're going to reschedule him. And then the 11th, Thursday the 11th, Sean and I will do our face-to-face. And then Friday, 7 p.m., Juanita Haney. If you're having problems with if you're having problems with the notifications, you can sign up for Rumble, or not sign up, but subscribe to my Rumble channel. It will send out notifications. Same with YouTube. I get it though. Like, I sometimes forget why I even signed up to subscribe to somebody, but my channel is worth it. So there you go. Have a great evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you again real soon. God bless you. God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Deion's Daily Dose. This has been Deion's Daily Dose, hosted by Deion Bergeron. Executive producers, Sean Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Deion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.